Sammy Elkassir, the Sheik is here.
Glad to be here. Thank you guys.
I don't want to steal your thunder by telling your story. I'll let you tell it. So take us back to the beginning and how you got started.
Okay, it was 2001, and I called a couple of different federations in New Jersey. Just decided I wanted to try something different in life, and eventually found Fat Frank of Jersey All Pro Wrestling, and went training into their school. You know, you pay in. This school, you kind of pay like a fixed amount each session. Some schools you pay for a full amount. This was pay as you go. So ended up having my first class with the same first class as I mentioned before of Jay Lethal, who ended up obviously doing great things on the indie and TNA scene. And throughout the whole, it was about a year and a half that I was doing it, and I was a fan before, a fan after. If you want to call me a mark, go right ahead. I'm happy with that. You saw a heck of a lot of things and a lot of what you would consider stars of both your past, present, and future. A lot of things that are surprising. 9/11 happened around this time, and so they decided to turn me into a Sheik to play off the heat. And it seemed to me, for me personally, the gimmick, I thought I did a decent job with promos. As a wrestler, I was okay. Never really had a great match, but as a manager and as a promo, once I learned to stop scripting things, the less I scripted, the better I think things went. The fans seemed to love it, though. It was hilarious telling people how stupid their country is and how smelly they are and how much they, need a shower and all that kind of, silly stuff. And then after the show, they want an autograph from you, and it's like, wow, okay, that's kind of cool. But, yeah, got put into the main show right away after our first student show just because the heat was easy and had to learn very quickly. I was always a sandbagger. For those who don't know what that means, it basically means someone tries to pick you up, supposed to be lightweight, and for some reason I could never be lightweight, so a lot of moves I couldn't really do effectively. That was my biggest problem as a physical performer. And as like I said, more of a manager in a promo, you just kind of being yourself, people kind of eat it up, no matter how easy or hard your gimmick is, if you can just be yourself. Throughout the time, I got involved in things like Axel Rotten, put a couple knots in the back of my head from unprotected steel chair shots. I would not suggest anybody do those. I remember there was one show we did in Seaside Heights, and there's one wrestler I won't name. He was in ECW. Him and his partner, they were clearly on some heavy drugs. And that was one of the things that turned me off, seeing the lifestyle. Because I grew up in that time period being a big fan of ECW more than anything else, and to see these guys like that. One guy I would name, Shane Douglas, who, when you see some of his shoot interviews, he comes off very humble and nice. It was exactly the same thing. But his forehead looked worse than what people see of Triple H's, and that kind of surprised me because I don't remember him being very hardcore of a wrestler. So, a lot of that stuff kind of turned me off. But, there was a lot of exciting times too with, I was working with Gino Caruso, and I was on a show where he had the Iron Sheik booked, so he made me the Iron Sheik's nephew, actually in the main event, and that was a fun time. He's kind of like what you see on television, just not as freaked out as some of the things I've seen on the internet.
Right, he turns it up. He plays the gimmick for people who are watching him.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, but it's basically who he is. He's a nice guy. A lot of nice people in wrestling. I did see one wrestler who was a WWE wrestler once get aggressive with a photographer who she had gotten in the way in the match and ripped her shirt. But I had also seen guys like Chris Candido and Sonny who were late to the very same show, and they were very apologetic, shaking hands with everybody. I mean, they still got to do in the main event because that's what they were booked for, but there's a lot of contrast, I think, in the industry, at least in the indies from what I saw, and guys going back and forth in terms of personalities. But generally, it's tough, and we're now in a world where, depending on what your goals are, really determines where you might end up. Because I remember for me at the time, there's one other thing I didn't mention. Like during this all, I was trying out for the different Tough Enoughs, and I actually got invited to Chicago for one of the 3 locations for Tough Enough 3. So I actually got to meet like John Gaburek and get interviewed by Al Snow and those guys. And I did a poor job in front of him, but I did get to meet Davari there and one of the two eventual winners, which was not John Morrison, but John. My memory's bad. The other guy who won was part of that, and that was an exciting experience, obviously. But it's tough industry depending what your goals are. At that time, I was still Marky. My goal was I want to be in WWE, and I wanted to be a big star. And when you're 20 years old, 21 years old, it's not really always reality what you're thinking.
Right. Now, there are so many questions I can ask out of the whole gamut of things that you just ran through, but I'm actually going to backtrack first before I get into any specific details, because I think there's a key issue that I want to address that I mentioned to you in our pre-email conversation, and that's the ethnicity and the background of playing a Sheik and playing an Arab character, because I believe that is your background yourself, but clarify if I'm mistaken as to your background.
No, I'm 100% Egyptian. Both my parents were born in Cairo. And I'm not a Sheik, you know,
Well, yeah.
I'm an American. I don't even speak Arabic, to be honest with you. I mean, I know words and phrases and can, you know, take elements of the culture and incorporate it into my gimmick, but a lot of it was pretty offensive if you know what I'm, like a lot of the things I'd say in Arabic were, you know, to someone who's, devout, Muslim, let's say, they would probably be offended. And some of my family in Egypt, when I told them about it, weren't too happy. But
which is exactly what I was going for. That's what I wanted to ask you was, were you worried about being offensive to your parents' culture, your own culture, or did you think this is what I got to do? I got to be over the top, and this is what they want me to do?
The latter. It was more like, this is what I got to do, this is what I want me to do. And if anyone ever has an issue with it, or if it gets to be out of hand, then, you know, reevaluate. But, you know, people would bring signs and cheer and laugh, and it was surprising. I think it was like I gave them a comic relief to expel the frustration out in wrestling, you know. It's one of the reasons why I think you do certain angles like that, you know. Jersey All-Pro generally was not the most, it was in some ways more hardcore than ECW in terms of the blood. That's why the New Jersey banned blood for any, you know, basically banned blood because they had so much. So they weren't afraid to be controversial. And from my perspective, it was just, you know, do what you gotta do, and if anyone complains, readjust them. The only time I ever got a complaint was in Brooklyn once. Someone wanted the intro, the beginning of my theme music cut out at their shows because it had the national anthem starting, and then it scratches out, and my voice comes out and says "Stupid American Fools," and this Arab song plays, and he didn't like that beginning part. But throughout the entire time, it's the only time anyone ever said anything that I was aware of.
But at the same time, I mean, as a wrestling fan yourself, you said you were a mark before, a mark after, and even to some degree a mark during. And you don't have to apologize for that. The name of this night is Angry Marks, so we're marks too. It's all good here. But
I appreciate that.
At the same time, I've got to know, you know, being that you are a mark and you follow the other stuff and not just the stuff you were involved in, when you saw the Muhammad Hassan character come along and how he was portrayed in WWE, were you happy with that? Were you upset with that? Did you think it was good, bad, reflected well, poorly? What were your thoughts?
I had mentioned before I was working in a small fed called BWO. Richie Rotten was the head. He had brought in Tom Pritchard and Kevin Kelly to give us, you know, an optional extra paid session for training and insight. We did promos and stuff, and Kevin Kelly told me to change your gimmick. That's what I'm going to have to do, because you didn't think that the world would accept it or WWE would accept it. So when I saw Muhammad Hassan come out, especially the way he was doing and the way it was portrayed, I felt so bad for him just because I thought he was doomed from the start based on the gimmick, but it was kind of pissed me off a little bit. It kind of made me think to, like, tough enough, and if I had not just choked in front of them, maybe I could have had a chance somewhere, but, you know, to be realistic, unless I figured out a way not to sandbag, I had no real shot at anything, but maybe managing, like I said.
Well, and that Muhammad Hassan character was unfortunately doomed by the fact there was the terrorist incident in London. Right at the same time, they taped an angle for SmackDown where they had his, like, henchmen come out and do stuff that was, you know, basically drawing too close a comparison. Total coincidence that they did that angle at the same time that incident took place, but it got them all the kind of heat they didn't need, so the character got cut.
Well, I think there was a problem with the idea with or without. The bombings obviously just exemplified everything, but the angle itself just, what's the point? How is this entertaining, as they would like to say?
Right.
It's a different context and worse, obviously, than them, interrupting the Russian national anthem and then apologizing when they come back from break like they did this week. But it's still the same concept of just don't do it then, But, for me, when I saw when that part happened and he got ousted, I felt bad for him. And I guess in my case, if I was working for them doing the same thing, it'd be the same result. So, most likely. So,
well,
it is what it is. And I'm glad that we're kind of not doing stuff like that anymore.
Right.
For the most part.
And no pun intended here, but I have hijacked this entire conversation so far. So I'm going to turn it over to Jordan, and he can make a less politically incorrect joke than I just did in my segue.
Well, pretty much you were talking about your whole gimmick thing and how that gimmick came about, and obviously with your roots of Egyptian heritage. When you found out from the booker, tell us who pretty much gave you that gimmick and your first reaction to what it was going to be. Like, how did you feel when you found out you were going to do this gimmick? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you think about it?
Well, Frank, it was Friday after it happened, and Frank came up to me and said, "You're going to be the Sheik." And for a second, I froze mentally because I didn't know how to respond after the week that it just went through, and then I was like, "Okay, cool, all right, let's make this work." That was it. That was really it. And one of my close friends was upset at me because I had been upset about what happened all week, and then called him and told him I'm going to be a Sheik. He was like, after everything that you just said, so. At the moment, I don't know, just kind of, okay, that's what it is. I'm gonna go for it and make it the best that I can.
Pretty much name your early, memories. Obviously, when I started out in the world of wrestling, I've met a few big names. Pretty much, who was that first big name that you pretty much associated with or met or got advice from, and tell us how that experience went.
I'd have to say it was the Iron Sheik, just because I think he was the first really big star I watched growing up that I met. A lot of the guys were more 90s and 2000, and just talking about the match itself, the first thing when he came backstage, he was all angry and stuff, and it turned out he was just selling. But he came back, and first thing I asked him, how was the match? He was like, "Yeah, it was okay, and certainly got to work on keeping yourself elevated and protecting yourself." I don't know if it was more what he was saying, but just who it was coming from. There is an element, I think, of human nature to take people more seriously, even if necessarily what they're saying isn't as valuable as someone else who you might not take it seriously. So that's kind of the one that sticks out. That's when I realized if I'm going to make it, I'm going to really have to work hard at this. And if I can't do that, then maybe I shouldn't be a wrestler or just be a manager, which kind of got stubborn about wanting to do both, but never really wanting to fully go back into it, so that's why I never went back.
Awesome. I'll let CBJ ask a few more questions, and I will ask you a few more.
All right. Well, when you made that transition to manager, as you said yourself, you were unable to overcome some of the physical aspects of it that, it doesn't always work out for everybody when they try to be a wrestler. Not everybody has the same skill set. Sometimes even people who try to train really physically hard to get in the best shape possible still can't grasp the moves. I mean, we see that on Tough Enough, is there are people who are in tremendous shape who just can't seem to get down the basics of bumping. But at the same time, when you made that decision to transfer over and be a manager, did you think, I still have to keep this cosmetic shape? I still have to...
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I didn't really make it myself, so to speak. It was more of, I was kind of doing both at the same time, but, I didn't go to anybody and say, okay, I don't want to wrestle anymore, I want a manager. It was just, I didn't have the, going from your first student show match in late October to your first angle with the owner of the federation on the main show in November, 2 weeks later, to having your first match, which is a bring your own weapons match. So you can work with that, but to still have your first match, from training for 3 months to being on the main roster and working once every other week or sometimes once a week or even once a month, depending. It's just not enough time for me to really develop anything, or anyone develop anything. There's very few people who are that capable of doing that, like the Big Show, let's say.
Right. So it was more that you got brought up too fast. You didn't have time to develop.
I would say that's a part of it, and there was something about, my my way of elevating my body that was just not there. Early on, scripting matches more than later on, calling it in the ring more later on got a little better, but there was always that sandbagging issue. And there was always that people say that sometimes someone in wrestling just gets it and sometimes some people never get it. I don't think I ever got it. I never got like the true idea of psychology in the ring as a wrestler. It's different when you're watching it to appreciate something than when you're doing it. People talk about, I want to go back, if like Terry Funk has retired 20 times, because you want to go back, get that thrill, but he gets it on that end of generating the fans. And I never thought I really got it, in addition to not having the understanding of how to protect myself properly, doing, let's say, a big top rope body slam or even a side slam, like certain moves, just, I couldn't get it. And the psychology, I couldn't get it. So kind of transitioned away from it after some personal problems in life, and that was it. That's pretty much it.
Well, now, some of the people who, quote, get it naturally are people that come into it that already have a certain athletic skill set. Like, people said Kurt Angle got it right away, but he had all those years as a collegiate and Olympic level wrestler that he was already fundamentally able to do that. And Big Show, when he came in as the Giant, he was already athletic. He'd been playing basketball. He knew how to be light on his feet, even for a big guy. So, I guess my question, Sammy, is, did you have an athletic background before you got into pro wrestling?
High school, through childhood and high school, but nothing beyond that.
So you didn't play JV basketball or anything?
No, I played not. I went to private school, so it was more private school sports. Like going to other private school type things. Nothing serious like that. I was a bodybuilder for a while. Or not actually a bodybuilder, that's a little extreme, a weightlifter for a while, and worked at a gym for most of that time period. So there was an element of health in that way, but it's funny because by the time I got to wrestling, I lost a lot of that conditioning, so my first match, I'm a bit tubby. So there's still the athletic ability and the cardio and the conditioning, which, running the ropes is probably one of the best cardio things you can do. So that helps, but no, not like some of these guys who have that real strong background. Just more standard high school stuff.
All right. Well, Jordan, I want you to jump back in, and then I'll come back with some more questions, and after that we can go to the news.
Kind of look back at your career, and always a lot of workers, obviously, on the independent scene like to pick out that one certain show, that one certain event that they enjoyed working. Tell us your favorite show that you worked and why. Tell us your best experience at a show that you've had as a worker.
That first show where I had the weapons match with Frank. I had the student show with the full gimmick, with the garb and the music and everyone crazy and the fans booing. So then he brought me in 2 weeks later. I started berating everyone. He comes out and I get teamed up later in the show with Skinhead Ivan. Yeah, I don't know if you know who that is. And then they set up a match for December. And that first show, you didn't know what to expect because, I had that match, the student show match, but that was one thing. This is a real wrestling match. And even if it's $20 and I spent $40 to bring the table to the show that broke early, it was exciting because you didn't know what to expect. And that memory lasts forever. For me, that first time of really giving the fans something on a scale that's going to be on tape, that people are paying to see, getting hit in the head with a plastic pinball machine, a frying pan, a steel chair, as crazy as that sounds. It wasn't a match. It was a garbage match, to be honest with you, but it was just this is actually having a wrestling match as a fan of wrestling. That's basic.
Just to clarify really quick, Skinhead Ivan is also Crazy Ivan, right?
Correct. Yeah, at that time, it was Skinhead Ivan, and we were not a tag team. That's part of the managering I did, and eventually we got Stryker to join our team, and that was storyline, and a Gentleman Boogaloo, and we had Devastation Inc. was our group name, and that was about 6 months or 9 months after that we were all a group together.
All right. Well, Jordan, back to you. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, it's Crazy Ivan. Sorry.
Mostly, in any wrestler's career, there's always that one point where a wrestler says something, or a certain talent says something to that certain person, and it kind of makes them really think about why they're doing this, why they're in the business, why they're having that. Have you ever had one of those experiences where someone in the back just gave you a hard time and you felt like quitting and you didn't? I've kind of been through those experiences before, but like, has someone ever told you, like, oh, you should stop doing this, or you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, and how did you react to it?
Early in the training, actually, before even any matches or anything, I was not progressing well. And the other students and the teachers were not afraid to let you know. They weren't, like, complete, dicks about it, but, it was their body language, the things they'd say to you, the looks they'd give you. So actually, a lot of times people try to do something and then right away they say, they realize they think they're not cut out for it, or they realize they're not going to have a shot and they just give up, or, classic example, go on a diet and back to donuts a week later. And so it was that moment, it was like, I might not have had the experience I had if I didn't decide to just keep trying. And by keeping trying and learning certain things and getting better in certain ways, I could see the respect being earned by my peers, and then end up making a lot of friends out of it. My friend, a friend of mine who was training with the time, Mike, we're still friends today, which is funny because he calls me Sheik still. But when I saw Stryker at like a year ago, and he hadn't seen me in like 12 years, he said Sammy, which kind of like, wow, you remembered my name is Sammy. Everyone else in wrestling still calls me Sheik.
Now, just to clarify, this is the Matt Stryker of I am Matt Stryker, I am your teacher, and currently in Lucha Underground, not the other Matt Stryker, right?
No, yes, the current Matt Stryker in Lucha Underground. He was working for them for January of 02, and his gimmick was a losing streak, and he broke the losing streak by turning heel and joining the Sheik's army, pretty much.
Awesome.
And so I uploaded a clip. I bought a bunch of tapes online of some of the matches I had. I haven't converted them all to digital. They're all VHS. But I uploaded a little while back a clip of me at a show jumping off of the ring into a table through Pete and Dan of Tough Enough 2, and right after that you see Stryker in a turban, just Sabu pointing to the sky while the fans chant, "Holy shit!"
Nice. I gotta watch that one. Is it under your own handle on YouTube, or is this something I should go to the board and look for? How would I find it?
I'll send you a link.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, send me one too. Are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'll send it to you on Twitter. There was one other thing of note that I didn't mention. Like I mentioned on the Brian and Vinny show. There was a time where I had a car and I was willing to go where it was. So I had been asked in that time to take American Dragon first, and then a month later Frankie Kazarian from New Jersey to Delaware to an ECWA show. So I'd spent with Daniel Bryan. I think I spent a good 5-6 hours with him because my tire burst. Kazarian, didn't have that trouble, so it was a few less hours. And the one thing I remember about both of them is wrestling. They love wrestling, and I think they have a love of wrestling that most of us watching and a lot of the guys in the business can't comprehend. And that's one of the reasons why I think they're as good as they are, is because it's like a love that most. Someone says, "Oh, why do you watch that stuff?" It's like, I look at them and say, how can you love it that much? And I think that's what makes them so great, is because they understand it so well and think about it so much, and in these cases talk about it so much. So I think the key to being successful in life is what you want to be. That is your life. There is nothing else.
Oh, yeah. And I personal experience from knowing him back when he was still Bryan Danielson before he really got big in WWE. Whenever I would run into him in a show, or the summer that I saw him in Las Vegas at a convention, that literally he does think about wrestling and talk about wrestling all the time. It is his life. That's why he became the performer that he was, because his brain is just wired for that. He's naturally always thinking about how can I do the next great thing in wrestling, because I love wrestling that much.
Exactly. I mean, people talk about the whole big guy thing in WWE and their hatred of small guys, and in the last, he won the title last year and he wasn't even supposed to. going from a place 10 years ago where probably people thought he never had a chance with them. So that says a lot about him as a man and as a wrestler and as a performer. I have the highest respect for him.
I couldn't agree more. And hey, I say the same thing now. Talking, you mentioned Kazarian, and every time I've seen Kazarian on a show, whether it's been Independence or Ring of Honor or TNA, that guy has always stood out to me as being very passionate, and I think it's unfortunate that a lot of the places he's been, except maybe for that time he was in a tag team with Daniels and TNA, people haven't understood just how passionate he was. And that was one of those few times when you could see Kazarian getting to be himself because he got to play off Daniels as his foil and vice versa, and you really understood how passionate he was.
That's right. I'll be honest with you. I was never really much of a TNA watcher, but I hear from time to time, and they were definitely highlights when they're on the screen. And those shows I was talking about, like Kazarian's show, like Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles were backstage and stuff. They were there too, and it's just amazing just to think how far things come in that way. How so much time could pass, and you look at these guys, and it's like you said, you wish he could have gone farther, but where else is there to go?
That's
it's not really. I don't consider it a monopoly, but the WWE is. If you want to make money in wrestling, that's big money in wrestling in America. That's it. So.
Right, you're two places you're really going to make big money is overseas working for New Japan or in the States working for WWE. That's your big money ticket.
Yeah, so when that's the environment, as some of the best people out there get unnoticed, unfortunately.
Right. Unless, of course, there's very few people who can command that high price on the independent scene, but if you're one of those guys like AJ Styles or Christopher Daniels where you can get, a few $1,000s just to come in for one show, you can make a pretty good living on the indies, but there aren't a lot of guys who are at that upper tier.
No, there's not. And that's probably because, Prince Devitt is now at W. A lot of those guys have been recently signed.
That's true, yeah. Your Kevin Steens, your Sami Zayns, they're all going to Next, and they're playing their trade in WWE, working their way up to the main roster.
Exactly. So, it's a tough business, and I would say anyone who's thinking about it, evaluate why you want to do it. If it's to be a WWE superstar, it's going to be a lot harder than it is to be a pro wrestler. I would say, and it's obvious, that's an obvious thing in any form. But the point is that the environment's not what it used to be for anybody, and I'm hopeful long term things can improve for the entire industry.
Yeah, well, it's not that different from Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my apologies. The thing you look at, and that's one thing that, if you guys listen to JGW, that's one thing that Jimmy Jacobs said in an interview, is that, one important thing in wrestling is patience. If you love it that much, like Jacob said, he's worked with guys far more talented than him who just quit because they didn't, really have that much motivation. But the more, if you're patient about it and you keep going, there's another good chance that you're going to get a shot with the big time. So that's another thing to put in mind as well.
True. And what I was going to say is, at least we're starting to see some alternatives bubbling up. We don't know what kind of money it is or how much money there's going to be in it long term, but, like for example, Global Force Wrestling, it seems like it's starting to finally coalesce for them. They're promoting the New Japan pay-per-view in January. They're bringing in Jim Ross to do the announcing, so it seems like they're on the cusp of something there. And then I mentioned Lucha Underground because Matt Stryker is doing the commentary there. We've heard differing things about the contracts that El Rey Network and AAA are offering the Lucha Underground talent, but at least it's another place for people to go. And then we hear that TNA may be back in January on Destination America. So at least there are going to be some options out there other than WWE and, of course, Ring of Honor, which is always an option. But I guess just when you look at the landscape, Sammy, and you see Lucha Underground and you see Global Force, do you think there's hope for a revival next year, that things might get better?
Next year? No. Not 2000. I don't think 2015, unless a lot of that still depends on WWE. If WrestleMania is a giant hit and the next, Steve Austin, everyone likes to say the next John Cena. I'd rather say the next Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin comes about, then yes. But it's going to take a lot longer than that for any up and coming federation or as I like to call the Lucha Underground television show, it's going to take a lot longer than that to really establish themselves and be a big player. Technically speaking, WWE could be put out of business by another company if, someone with $50 billion is willing to spend as much money as possible. So a lot of these things that they talk about, with Global Force Pro Wrestling, bringing in Jim Ross, how much is this going to cost? How does this translate to new fans? Saying you have great things, you could have a show with the 10 greatest performers of all time, but if the booking sucks or the matches suck or both, especially both, obviously, in the long run, people are not going to care. I mean, WCW towards the end had a lot of great stars, and it still didn't. It went out of business.
I'm sorry, I find an eerie similarity right now between TNA and WCW because both of them, right as they were getting ready to go off the air, started just letting it all hang out and having fun, and there was good shows and good matches. It's like, I'm getting deja vu now when I watch Impact Wrestling. It's like, this really feels like the end because now these shows are fun. They're just going out there and doing their thing.
That's what I've heard, and I did watch Bound for Glory, and I thought it was okay, but certainly things from what I understand have gotten better. I think the problem with TNA is a problem with a lot of companies like this, even WWE struggling the same fashion. It's a certain stubbornness. It's a certain, this is the way I want things to go, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. And when you're the boss, obviously that's actually how it works. But, when I hear the stories of Garth Brooks wants to buy them, and it's like, no, we can't sell it to you unless Dixie has a big role. And it's like, well, why is that more important than the stake of the company? Or the money that you're getting by selling it instead of the money you're losing by keeping it. So I think that certain people I don't want to say in power necessarily, but certain people of influence need to step up and admit, like, hey, this isn't working, or hey, we need to really be more honest with ourselves about what's going on, or there's not going to be a company. In the case of TNA, who knows? What if they're getting $10 million? I don't know what their deal was with Spike, but it could be 60-70% less money, or it could be the same money. I doubt it, obviously, but the point is that depending on the range, it could be so low that they say, well, you know what? Well, we can't afford to do it anyways. So let's hope for the best.
Yeah,
that's all you can do is hope for the best.
I don't think and we're going to assume, just for the sake of argument here, that Destination America is their final destination. No pun on their previous pay-per-view names. But if that's where they wind up, they're only in 55 to 60 million homes. I happen to be one of those homes. I know I have that channel. Not everybody does. So
I don't have it.
Yeah,
I'm up here in Winnipeg, so I don't think I have Destination America at all.
No, probably not. Just based on the name alone, you're probably not going to get that channel in Canada. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're only in 50 million homes and Spike is in 100 million homes, then they're only going to offer half as much money at most, and probably less than that, because they just can't afford it with what they get for advertising rates. They can't give TNA that much money compared to what Spike did.
Yeah, it might be, TNA may have to, I don't know if this even makes sense in a verbiage term, but they may have to become an indie fed. They may have to, they could still be on national TV like that, but so is Lucha Underground. And while, like I said, I consider it a TV show, as a wrestling federation, it's watched by a lot less people than TNA, and it's currently in the same number of homes, that the TNA's expected to be in. So, and that's a show that every single one of my friends who a lot of times walk out the room or watching wrestling, like, they want to watch Lucha Underground, even if they're only one of 18,000.
Well, at least
you have to make people want to watch it, and it's not like there's no magic formula, obviously. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at least with Lucha Underground, it feels right now to me like it's a snowball rolling downhill. It's not big right yet, but the longer it continues this momentum, the bigger it seems to grow. Because every week the audience gets a little bigger, and more people figure out they have the channel, and they're watching the clips on YouTube, or they're hearing about it from their friends. I feel like, I don't want to say it's going to ever be Ring of Honor big, but it feels like it's starting to gain as it goes downhill.
Well, a show, if they kept the same exact format and gained a lot of popularity, at some point, I feel like if they're gonna, if their goal is to be, let's just say a competitor to WWE, I don't see the television format working on that stretch. I mean, if it stayed that way, it would almost be a different product where they might be slightly different competition. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. But the point is, I don't think they could get to that size without becoming more of a wrestling company, and by then they lose a lot of their appeal. So it is very interesting, but I'm definitely going to keep tuning in, especially when my friend perks up when I say he's sleeping, and I'm like, I'm putting on Lucha Underground. He just perks up. I want to watch. He's a very casual wrestling fan who hates Raw.
So let me.
Well, here's the thing.
Oh, go ahead.
And
Jordan.
you look at Lucha Underground, and obviously Lucha Underground is a great promotion. It's new and everything, but I don't get the promotion. I kind of want to see more promotions be like their own specific product, because the odds of you comparing to WWE, you're not gonna win. You got Vince McMahon, who's a genius, and it's just physically impossible to get any wrestling promotion ahead of WWE. But what Lucha Underground should do is they're doing something different, which is awesome, and they're making it on TV, which is kind of really cool with this whole TV deal they have. I'm looking forward to seeing what Lucha Underground is doing, but I don't think they should make it a competitor to WWE. I just think they should just do their own thing, and the fans will come.
I think to bring it full circle, and based on something Jordan says, I can tie this all together perfectly. You mentioned earlier, Sammy, that TNA right now, they're kind of in this position where if they get less money, they might just have to be like an indie touring company instead of trying to pretend they're a national promotion. Well, this is what I think about. When I look at Ring of Honor tapings and I see bigger crowds for ROH than TNA drew in Bethlehem, and I think to myself, Ring of Honor is an indie promotion with a national TV syndication deal. I almost feel like TNA is somewhere between Ring of Honor and Lucha Underground, in that they're not going to be this niche product on a small network that nobody has, but they're also not going to be syndicated nationally with the big audiences of Ring of Honor. So what they've got to try to do is find some comfortable in-between ground where they're like, they have a skeleton crew, they do tapings like they did in Bethlehem, but they run as an indie trying to be big instead of a big company that's drawing small crowds, if that makes sense.
I live about an hour from Bethlehem, and I mentioned to my friend who I was talking about before, because we like going to live. He likes going to live shows. I was like, oh, maybe we can go check out a couple of TNA tapings, and that conversation literally lasted about 20 seconds. And the point I'm making is that some people have said, oh, the company has no chance, the TNA name is tainted, all that stuff, and if they can find a way to create a product that has a buzz, that gets people excited, like Lucha Underground is doing. It doesn't have, I'm not saying copy them like, because that's never works for them copying anything, but just something that appeals to people. And what I found that people want is wrestling. I have people watching, when people do watch with me who are not fans, they're not different than what people in as people say, the IWC say. They think Raw is corny. They think NXT is great because they love good wrestling. And like I said, everybody seems to be getting into Lucha Underground, but one of them even called it telenovela. I don't even know how to say it, I'm sorry. Telenovela.
Yeah, telenovela, the Mexican soap opera. Yes,
I didn't even tell them that, I heard I think Dave Meltzer call it that, but I didn't even tell them that anything about it. And he just said, this is like telenovela wrestling. So TNA needs to create an excitement, and like, a lot of people discussing this, talking about it, complaining or being positive or whatever. We can't, we don't have the answers. We could sit here and talk about this all day, but the reality, it's a lot tougher for all these companies, even WWE. I can sit there and rant on Vince McMahon about, being a wrestling company, but it's also a publicly traded company worth, at times $1 billion. So there's a million things going on, and sometimes that focus on the product is, put to the back burner, and I'm a believer that should always be, at least in terms of a television product, should be the number one thing. If the least important thing to Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones was the product, there would not be a second season of either of those shows.
Right. No, and they wouldn't have been the huge ratings hits that they are, and Netflix wouldn't be paying millions of dollars for the rights to air shows like that if they weren't all about what the show is first, and then the marketing and the promotion of the show comes second and third after they create a great show.
Yeah, and I think when the companies get big enough, they want to do things that they want to overcomplicate things, or they want to do things in a vision that is away from pro wrestling. And I just think that you need to stick with pro wrestling. If you're a pro wrestling company, then be a pro wrestling company. If you're not a pro wrestling company, then don't call yourself a pro wrestling company. Don't have the word wrestling in your name.
It's actually kind of sad when Daniel Bryan has to break script and cut a promo saying, I am a wrestler. What I do is professional wrestling. And we're so trained from reading the dirt sheets and listening to Brian and Dave and all the other things that we check out on the internet, we know that wrestling is actually a dirty word, and he just broke code by calling himself a wrestler. That's how bad it's got.
Yeah. I would say, though, on the other hand, that we're older than our favorite time of wrestling. Whether you were a fan in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, I don't think we'll ever have that magic that we all look for at a time. It feels like, if they just did this, if they just did that, and all the ranting I do, all the complaining I do about the product, because I think it could be a lot better. I think a lot of times we're looking for something that you can't have simply because of you're more mature, or have a different way of thinking. So I think sometimes we have to remember that, and other times we have to remember, like, hey, we're going to watch WrestleMania next year, and let's assume it's Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. We know that Reigns is going to win because we, as quote unquote, listen to the dirt sheets, whatever you want to call it. Sorry.
Exactly. Like, everyone relies on these wrestling news sites, and which is awesome. And as much as I'm involved with that stuff, and I'm a part of it, it kind of at times it gives it away. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's better to be that fan that doesn't read those sites all the time and just watches, for 1 week, watches it without hearing all the rumors of what happened. Like, back in the 80s, back in the 70s, of course the 60s, there was no wrestling rumor websites. You just watched it and you found out what happened from watching it. And a lot of, with today's technology, a lot of that has changed. And a lot of hardcore wrestling fans, wrestling nerds, go on these websites and they find out who's gonna win and all of that, which is awesome, and I'm a part of that, and I'm glad to bring that to you. But I'm just saying, point being said, is technology has changed, and people can find out what's going on behind the scenes more easily.
Well, let me turn what you said into a question, Jordan, and I'll ask it to Sammy. Do you think we've actually killed the golden goose with the wrestling on the internet? That it's too inside now, and we know too much, and the thrill is gone?
I don't necessarily know if it's wrestling news sites and audio shows or whatever. It's nature of the internet, things are out there. And part of kids nowadays, oh God, I sound like I'm 80 saying that.
Well, none of us are young, so go ahead.
I'm going to put it to you this way. Like, it's almost factual now that a lot of the, especially younger kids, don't even know what a physical keyboard and mouse are. They're all iPads and Android tablets and etc. I was at I think it was the first Hell in the Cell show with it was whatever year Jeff Hardy left, and yeah, it was that year. The first Hell in the Cell show, and there was this kid, and he's like, had to be 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, 2009, and he's like talking to us about Jeff Hardy's drug arrest.
And you're going, yeah, he read this on the internet. He knows all this.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where all sides have to realize that this is what it is. So WWE and the wrestling companies need to not try and hide the fact that, quote unquote, everyone knows, what wrestling is. They should stop pretending to a point. Obviously you don't want to be in the middle of a match and say, hey, are you okay, to your opponent, but I think you have to realize it's just the way the world is now, and regardless of news sites, people would find out, and there are probably 6-year-old kids who love John Cena that, knew he was going to wrestle Bray Wyatt 3 months before they even had their feud. That's one thing I learned as I'm getting older, is kids are a lot smarter than we are.
And everyone wants to be, and that's the thing I notice in wrestling as well, is that most of the fans that you see at the shows a lot of them just don't, like, if they're not involved in the business, like, of course, me and CBJ and yourself, Sammy, are, they always want to be that smart. They always want to be that smart fan. Most fans that watch wrestling are always smart about it, are very insightful. There's a lot of times where people just don't watch the product and enjoy it. The odd smart fan who isn't involved with anything in the business likes to just be smart about everything, and they just don't watch it and actually just enjoy it. And sometimes, like, that's what I kind of want to see more of. It's always good to have an opinion, but, like, all the time, sometimes you can always, like, even wrestlers, of course. Some wrestlers, people like myself, who are interviewers and everything, just go to the shows and have a good time at times.
Yeah,
so
sometimes
a lot of
you just
people,
got to turn off your
try
brain.
To be smart.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to turn off your brain and accept the realities, the things that aren't true in the physical real world. Like, in the physical real world, you wouldn't bounce off the ropes and then come flying at your opponent faster. That's not the way it works. But you turn off your brain and you watch it and enjoy it, and you know the rules of wrestling in your head, and you know how those things work physically. If you turn your brain off and just let yourself get caught up in the moment, the suspension of disbelief, as they like to say, that you gotta let yourself do that. You can't always think about it all the time. I mean, you're a mark too, Sammy. You said so yourself, so, you know.
I was going to say something, but I realized it didn't have anything to do with it. But, like, even to this day, I'm still when I'm at the live shows, like, my friend pointed this out to me, I'm still a ECW style fan douchebag.
You like to start the crowd chants then? Are you one of those guys?
I was there when, I was there at the Raw after, WrestleMania New York. My friend Mike actually started the ice cream guy chant, to be honest with you.
Nice.
No joke.
Nice.
But, not that, like a crowd like that, I can be the way I want to be, because there's a lot of, more, men and older people, but a lot of these shows do have families, younger kids, and I have a tendency to pretend like it's the year 2000, SmackDown, let's say. So, I've been told by my friend I'm a little bit of a immature douchebag, and I remember at that WrestleMania, I think I caused an entire family to leave before the main event, because they were there before the last match, and then they weren't, and I remember cursing a lot. So we don't always mature in every way we want to, unfortunately.
No. Well, and you can get swept up in trying to get things going and having fun, because it's an adrenaline rush, to be perfectly honest about it. If you start a chant and people join in with you, it's the greatest feeling in the world. And I know it can be a douchey thing to do at times, because it's about the wrestlers and it's not about the audience, and you're taking the focus away from them. But I'll admit it, when I was at an Impact show and Scott Steiner came out, I started a liver, enzymes, and people around me started doing it, and it was so funny to me, like, oh my god, I got Impact Wrestling to chant liver enzymes at Scott Steiner.
Where did you say this, Scott?
Liver enzymes who are in WWE, and it's like, it became the running joke of guys who were on steroids had elevated liver enzymes.
It's going to be hilarious to see what happens when he comes up here in Winnipeg to do the Manitoba tour here at CWE in January, and I'm going to ask Scott, hey, Scott, would it be possible to get an interview with you? God knows what he's going to say to that, because you know his character.
God knows what Scott Steiner is going to say anytime you put a mic in front of him.
But he seems like a really good guy, so at times. So it should be interesting to see how that plays out. It should be fun. That a little spoiler alert. Yes, I will be attempting to interview Scott Steiner in January. So we'll see how. I hope he doesn't call me white trash, though.
I hope he doesn't tell you that the Earth revolves on a 47-degree axis.
I remember that. That was hilarious.
So you can start chants like that at most indie shows and TNA type shows, but and you'll get the crowd to go along because they're the super hardcores, I'd say. But at a traditional WWE SmackDown,
hard, yeah.
When I'm there in like the fourth row screaming at Nikki Bella to show your tits, like trying to stand to show your tits chant in 2014, and all the parents and adults are looking at me like a jerk, and my friend has his head in his face. Yeah, I still got a lot to learn.
Well, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I've seen it happen at IWA Mid-South. I went to the Ted Petty Invitational, and they had a female valet there who was being really sleazy, and some of the fans sitting next to me started "You've got herpes," and the whole building started doing it. It's one of those where you bury your hand in your face, but at the same time you're like, wow, they're actually doing it.
And that's the thing too, is like, that's the difference of the whole PG thing in WWE now, is that mothers take their children, and if you're seeing Nikki Bella walk into the ring and you're asking her to show her tits, their mom's gonna look at you like, oh my god, you just said that in front of my child. And that's the way, it's so different from what it used to be, is you can't get away with that stuff anymore. And people are just trying to chant that to have fun, but like, I don't know about the whole PG thing, because since this PG thing happened, you can't get away with saying as much jokes as you used to. Not that saying that's okay, but it's just in general, you know what I mean? But that's why I like indie shows, because it's more interactive like that. You could say what you want, fans can say what they want, they can get involved, it's more interactive, and that's pretty much what I like about it.
Go ahead,
I do agree that the PG thing is a hurtful thing, but I came to realize that it's not, I mean, obviously it's not the solution, but it's not necessarily going to make anything better, because if you think about WWF to WWE, they were, I would say, adult-oriented from safely part of 97 through, I guess, 2008 or 9 when they became PG. But they were only really good from, like really good of a product as a whole from 97 to 2001. And then I think 05, 06 parts were okay too. So a lot of the TV-14 era was, Katie Vick and things like that, that were not good. And so having the ability to do things that are adult oriented, I personally think is the right solution if you've got the right, booking. But having the ability to do it doesn't automatically make you better.
And I think we over-glamorized the Attitude Era anyway. We look back on it fondly because wrestling was hot right then. But some of those angles, even back then, you look at them now like, I choppy you pee-pee. I
love that. I thought that was awesome.
It's hilarious, but it's hilarious in a bad way. Like, this isn't what wrestling really ought to be.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It's why, it's how I fell in love with sites like WrestleCrap, because when things like Katie Vick were going on, and I was like, is this really what I watch pro wrestling for? I'd go to WrestleCrap, and they'd write an article about it, and I'd laugh, and I'd feel better. Like, this is passionate about wrestling, but at least they understand when it's embarrassing, they're embarrassed too, and they can make fun of it.
Yeah. Some of the stuff is out of control.
It's the problem we all have where we can't admit to our friends we're wrestling fans because they look at you funny. They're like, you watch that? You watch that?
But you know what? I think that that's why I think we'll never have that. Part of the reason we'll never have that experience, not just because we're older, but I mean, in the 80s and 90s, at least in WWE's case, they had a lot of people who could put them out of business if you look at it from that perspective. And now because there's no competition, there's no real incentive to toughen up and take the risks. I feel like if there was a company that overtook them again, they would consider, say, screw Mattel. We got our asses on the line here. Let's give something that people want. Obviously knowing what that is the hard part. And I think maybe TNA is just, the Carter's way of letting their daughter fill her dream, and has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with she wants to be, I want to be Vince McMahon for 15 years kind of thing.
Yeah, I have a friend named Dave who will every now and then will post on my wall about wrestling, and that's the one thing he says is the reason TNA will never die is because it's Dixie Carter's Playhouse, and she gets to put her dolls in it, and she gets to dress up her dolls and make them do whatever she wants.
But then again, so is WWE Vince McMahon's Playhouse. I mean, it seems to me that there's more Playhouse going on there.
That's true. A lot of what you see that goes on, like Triple H calling Daniel Bryan a B-plus player, that's Vince McMahon getting to play with his dolls. He's like, yeah, go out there, you're the bigger doll, you make fun of the little doll.
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes, for sure.
But I think we've come full circle now. We've talked about your career. We've talked about the independent scene. We've talked about WWE, TNA, Lucha Underground, Ring of Honor. So maybe this is a good point for us to wrap it up, Sammy. And I'll let you get out any plugs you want to get out right now.
Oh, thanks. I'm actually more prepared this time, because last time I plugged stuff. This Saturday night in Rahway, New Jersey, is Jersey All Pro Wrestling is making its return. We will have Kurt Angle with World's Greatest Tag Team, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas versus Teddy Hart, Chris Sabin. It looks like to be the main event. And there's also Samoa Joe facing Hernandez. Matt Sydal, former Evan Bourne, is facing AJ Styles. Teddy Hart, I think I said him already. It's just a good show. I am trying to get back on the show, or get on the show maybe to be a part of just some angle, get beat up, or curtain jerk and have maybe Americans beat me up. But the show is so stacked that I doubt there'll be a spot. So I'll probably just watch it as a fan and hope to see you guys there, if anyone in the Jersey area.
And
if you need more information, japw.net.
And they can follow you on Twitter at SFETAZ, right? And then they'll get more information there as well.
Correct.